Welcome to The Deep Dive. We're the podcast where we really try to unpack complex topics, pull out the key insights, and basically give you a shortcut to feeling truly well-informed.
That's the goal.
So today, we're diving deep, really deep, into the world of the Master of Public Administration. You probably know it as the MPA degree. You've asked us to explore, what an MPA typically prepares you for, but also how Seoul National University's MPA program might be a bit different, how it stands out.
Right, and also the career side. What does the landscape actually look like for Korean students versus international grads who get this degree?
Exactly. So that's our mission for this deep dive.
And to do that, we've gathered quite a bit of material. We've got university admissions guides, career outlook reports to see where the jobs are.
Okay.
And actually, a really fascinating research paper from Seoul National University itself. It digs into this whole relationship between public service, citizen happiness, and trust in government.
Oh, interesting. So that gives us a real window into SNU's specific focus.
It really does. It shows the kind of thinking going on there.
Okay, great. So the big question driving our conversation today is, what does it really mean to go after an MPA, especially from a top-tier place like Seoul National University? And maybe more importantly, how can it launch you into a career that feels, fulfilling, one dedicated to the greater good?
That's the core of it. Let's unpack this.
All right. Where should we start? Maybe just defining the MPA itself.
Yeah, let's start there. Demystify it a bit. So fundamentally, an MPA is a graduate-level degree. It's specifically designed, really crafted for management and leadership roles, but within the public sector.
Okay, public sector. So different from, say, an MBA.
Exactly. That's the key distinction. An MBA, largely zeroes in on corporate profits, business strategy, the bottom line. The MPA completely pivots. Its whole emphasis is on improving communities, creating policies for the common good. It's really about educating students on the totality of public policy, how it gets made, evolves, how it changes, and crucially, how it's actually administered on the ground.
So less about profit margins and more about societal impact.
Precisely. If an MBA focuses on the company's financial health, the MPA is kind of focused on society's health, its well-being, its progress.
That sounds like a really versatile degree then. What kinds of skills does it actually give you?
It's designed to build a very practical, very impactful skill set. Think strong leadership capabilities, the ability to do strategic planning, not just short-term fixes.
Right.
Then there's the analytical side, rigorous policy analysis, and of course, deep practical expertise in public management. It's not just theory, it's about applying knowledge to solve real problems.
Yeah, so it's about actually doing things, managing things in the public interest.
Exactly. Navigating complex systems, driving positive change. That's the aim.
And to get that practical expertise, I imagine the coursework must be pretty rigorous. What's in the typical MPA curriculum?
Oh, definitely. It's built on solid academic foundations. You're delving into pretty high-level topics, things like public finance.
Which isn't just balancing the books, right?
Yeah, not at all. It's understanding how public money is raised, how it's allocated, how it's spent effectively and accountably for everything, from schools and roads to, public health programs. It's complex.
Okay.
What else? Then there's economics, obviously, but viewed through a societal lens. In-depth policy analysis, learning how to really dissect problems and design solutions that work. Statistics, naturally, for data-driven decisions.
Makes sense.
And research methods specifically tailored for public administration so you can actually evaluate if programs are achieving what they set out to do.
So it sounds like you developed some serious analytical chops. Learning how to evaluate systems, see what's working, what's not.
Absolutely. That analytical muscle is key. And you're right, there's some overlap with, say, a business degree in terms of quantitative skills or management principles. Both deal with organizations, efficiency.
But the goal is different.
Exactly. The fundamental orientation is totally different. An MPA is always, always geared towards public service outcomes, societal impact, not private profit. That's the defining line.
That orientation really feels like the core difference. Now, within that public service focus, can students specialize? Or is it a generalist degree?
Oh, definitely specialization is common. Most MPA programs offer formal concentrations, or at least a wide range of electives. This lets you tailor your studies to specific interests or career goals. Public administration is huge,
Yes,
right?
it covers so much ground.
Yeah.
So what are some of those popular specializations?
There's quite a range. Community and economic development is a big one, focusing on revitalizing areas, local growth. Environmental policy and natural resource management is obviously critical these days.
Hugely important.
Right. Then you have local government management running cities, counties. Very practical. Nonprofit management is another major track for people passionate about that sector.
Yeah.
Policy studies for those who really want to shape policy.
No.
Financial administration for the public finance experts. And healthcare administration managing hospitals, public health systems. That's a massive field for MPA grads too.
Wow. Okay. So lots of established tracks. What about individual elective courses? Can you get really specific or maybe even explore the more philosophical side?
Yes, the electives are where you can really fine-tune things. You might find courses like city and county management or something really specific like navigating nonprofit local government relationships.
Practical stuff.
Very practical, but also crucial courses like diversity in public administration, thinking about equity, inclusion, or things like community revitalization, community engagement, and urban governance. How do citizens actually participate?
Right.
You'll find skills-based courses too, like mediation and negotiation, and even, as you said, more philosophical ones. I saw values and bias in public policy listed as an example. That underscores the ethical dimension, which is constant in public life.
That sounds incredibly important, actually, thinking about the underlying values.
It is. So these electives really let you build a personalized path within the broader field.
Okay, so given this breadth, the focus on public service, the skills, what's the actual job outlook like? Is an MPA a good career investment?
You know, generally speaking, yes. The outlook is quite promising. There's a consistent, and in many areas growing, need for skilled people to manage public programs and services.
Good.
The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, for instance, projects pretty significant growth for some typical MPA roles. Some figures were as high as 28% growth projected between 2022 and 2032. That points to real demand.
That's substantial growth.
It is. And beyond just the number of jobs, while salaries vary, of course, many MPA positions are quite well compensated. But maybe even more importantly, we consistently see reports of high job satisfaction. People feel like they're actually helping others, contributing something meaningful.
That win-win you mentioned earlier, good career prospects and personal fulfillment.
Exactly. It really seems to deliver on that for many graduates.
So when we talk about where they work, it's not just government offices, right? You mentioned nonprofits.
Yeah.
Where else?
Right. The scope is much broader than people often assume. Yes, government agencies are a huge destination. Local, state, federal. Think City Hall, state environmental agencies, federal departments. That's classic MPA territory.
Sure.
But also, nonprofit organizations are major employers. Everything from tiny community groups working on local issues to massive international NGOs tackling global challenges.
Okay.
Healthcare facilities, especially in administration. Managing hospitals, clinics, public health systems requires that kind of expertise. Educational institutions, too, school districts, universities need administrators and policy people.
Right. Makes sense.
And interestingly, even private corporations, especially companies that deal a lot with government relations, public sector consulting, or even corporate social responsibility roles where understanding public policy is absolutely key.
So the skills are really transferable across sectors, as long as there's that public interface or policy element.
That's exactly.
Could you give us a feel for some specific career paths? Like, what does a city manager actually do day to day? Maybe mention some salary ranges to give folks an idea.
Sure, let's look at a few. Keep in mind, salaries vary a lot by location, experience, sector. But to give a ballpark.
Yeah, just a general idea.
Okay, so the city manager. Think of them as the CEO of a city. They oversee everything: parks, police, libraries, budgets, infrastructure projects. It's about ensuring the whole operation runs smoothly. Huge responsibility. Requires strong leadership, strategic thinking, communication. Salary-wise, you're often looking well into six figures, maybe starting around $96,000 or more, depending on the city size.
Wow, yeah, big job. What else?
How about a policy analyst? These are the folks doing the deep thinking behind policies. They research issues, analyze data, provide insights to decision makers. Maybe they're working on affordable housing solutions or analyzing the impact of a proposed environmental regulation. Needs sharp critical thinking, good writing skills. Salaries might start, say, in the mid-$60,000 and go up significantly with experience.
Okay, the research and analysis side.
Exactly. Then for the numbers people, a public finance manager. They oversee the money for government agencies or nonprofits, making sure funds are managed effectively, transparently. They might analyze the financial sustainability of a new public transit project, for example. Requires strong financial acumen. Salaries often approach or exceed six figures, maybe around $97,000 or so.
Right, managing the public purse.
Then, in the nonprofit world, a fundraising manager is absolutely vital. Planning events, running campaigns, securing donations to support the organization's mission. Needs great people skills, communication, passion for the cause. Estimated salaries can be quite strong, maybe around $125,000 in some cases.
Definitely essential for nonprofits.
And one more, maybe a health services manager, managing the day-to-day operations of hospitals, clinics, public health departments, scheduling, staffing, patient flow, implementing health policies, demands leadership, understanding complex healthcare systems, salaries often over $100,000.
These examples really show the tangible impact, right? You're managing things that directly affect people's lives.
Absolutely, and that goes back to the job satisfaction point. The financial rewards can be good, yes, but the recurring theme is that people feel they're in jobs where they can genuinely help others. It's why many are drawn to it.
Any famous examples spring to mind?
Well, a really prominent one often mentioned is David Petraeus. Before his high-profile roles as a U.S. general and head of the CIA, he actually earned his MPA back in 1985. It shows how this degree can be part of the foundation for leadership at the very highest levels of public service.
That's a powerful illustration.
Right.
Okay, let's pivot now specifically to Seoul National University. You mentioned their program and research. Let's take that deep dive into SNU's Graduate School of Public Administration. What's the structure like there?
Right. SNU's Graduate School of Public Administration, the Haenjong Daehakwan, has a pretty comprehensive structure. They offer distinct master's programs. There's the Master's in Public Administration itself, Haenjong Daehakwan, and also a Master's in Policy Studies, Jongchakak Jonggang. For the 2025 admission cycle, the guide mentioned each of these had about 37 openings for the master's level, so a decent cohort size.
37 each. Okay.
They also offer PhD programs in both public administration and policy studies, though with fewer spots, maybe 6 and 5 openings respectively, for those wanting to go deeper into research.
And you mentioned a global track.
Yes, there's a global administration track, Jilbil Haenjong Jinggang, clearly aimed at an international perspective, though the guide we saw didn't list specific admission numbers for that particular track for 2025.
Got it. So a full range from master's to PhD, core PA, and policy studies, plus that global focus. What about getting in? What are the general admission requirements for 2025?
Okay, general eligibility. For the master's programs, you need a bachelor's degree or equivalent by February 2025. If your degree is from an international university, you get a little extra time until March 2025. For the PhD, you need a master's degree by those same deadlines, and it generally needs to be in a related field, ensuring that academic foundation is there.
Makes sense. And English proficiency, that must be key, especially for international students or the global track.
Absolutely crucial. Applicants need to submit scores from either the regular TEPS exam or the TOEFL IBT, and the scores have to be pretty recent valid within 2 years of the application deadline. For 2025 entry, that deadline was October 11th, 2024.
Okay, 2 years. Do they accept different types of TOEFL?
They're quite flexible, actually. They accept TOEFL My Best scores and the home edition scores, which is helpful. But there's a catch with My Best scores. The earliest test date among your 4-section scores must be within that 2-year window.
Ah, that's a detail you wouldn't want to miss. So if your writing score is the oldest, that date starts the clock.
Exactly. It's a specific point to watch out for.
Are there minimum scores needed for public administration?
Yes. Generally, for the public administration masters, you're looking at a TEPS score of 327. That's equivalent to 601 on the old TEPS scale, or a TOEFL IBT of 96.
Okay, 96 on TOEFL. Pretty standard for top programs.
Right. Though there's a lower requirement for military commissioned applicants, TEPS 268 or TOEFL IBT 81. And there's a nice perk for SNU alumni.
Yeah.
If you already have an SNU master's and are applying for grad school there again, you might be able to use older scores, up to 10 years old, as long as they met the requirements at the time and meet the current minimums.
That's a good benefit for their own grads.
Yeah.
What does the application timeline look like? You mentioned the October deadline for scores.
Right, so for that 2025 spring admission cycle, the John G. Mojip, after the October 11th score deadline, interviews and oral exams, plus any written tests, started kicking off from October 16th. The first cut, the Stage 1 passers, were announced from October 24th. There was a second foreign language exam on October 26th, but that's usually more for humanities or arts, not typically public admin. Then the big day final results announced November 21st, and successful applicants register in early February 2025.
Gotcha. A pretty standard, though quite competitive timeline.
Standard structure, yes. And always good to remember those dates can shift slightly based on the university calendar.
Of course. So how do they actually choose people for the public administration masters? What's the selection process?
It's a two-stage process for the Master's in Public Administration. Stage 1 is all about document screening. They review your application materials and select roughly twice the number of planned admissions to move forward.
So if there are 37 spots, they pick maybe 74 people for the next round.
Something like that, yes. It narrows the field significantly. Stage 2 then involves an interview and an oral examination. Your performance in Stage 2 is combined with your score from the Stage 1 document review for the final decision. It's a holistic look.
Okay, documents plus interview. What kind of documents are key besides the transcripts and scores?
The core ones are usually a self-introduction and a study plan. And it's really important they emphasize this. You have to use the specific forms provided by the Graduate School of Public Administration. They have their own format and requirements.
Right, follow instructions carefully.
Absolutely. And always, always double-check the specific GSPA website for the full, definitive list of required documents because details can vary.
Good advice. Okay, so we understand the program structure, how to apply. Now, let's get into that unique aspect. You mentioned the research focus at SNU. That paper on government trust and happiness sounds fascinating. What's the core idea there?
This is where SNU's approach really distinguishes itself, I think. This research paper from late 2020 wasn't just looking at standard factors influencing trust in government. It specifically investigated the moderating effect of individual happiness on that trust.
Moderating effect. So, okay, what does that mean in this context? And maybe first, how do they even define government trust? That seems pretty fundamental.
Good question. They defined it quite clearly. The public's positive perception of how well the government, both central and local, operates in line with their expectations, and they stress why it matters. Trust grants legitimacy, encourages compliance, participation. It's the bedrock for efficiency, democracy, equity, and administration. Low trust leads to cynicism, non-compliance, inefficiency. It really undermines everything.
Okay, so trust is foundational. What factors did they find influenced it?
They looked at two main categories. First, internal government factors, basically, how well the government performs, especially public service satisfaction from the citizen's view.
Right.
This fits the standard idea. Better performance equals more trust.
Right, the performance trust link.
Exactly. Second, they looked at external government factors, things about the individual citizen, like their income, their political leanings, characteristics outside of government actions.
Okay, standard stuff so far. But then came the happiness factor. How did that play in?
This is the really interesting part. Happiness, which they treated as a moderating variable, was found to have this significant regulating effect on the relationship between public service satisfaction and government trust.
Regulating effect. Meaning?
Where the simple better performance leads to more trust idea is incomplete. The study suggests that link is significantly influenced, maybe even partly explained, by how happy the individual citizen is personally.
Wait, hold on. So you could be kind of unhappy with how the government is doing something specific. Maybe your local services aren't great. But if you're generally a happy person in your life, you might still trust the government overall.
That's exactly what the data suggests. It sounds counterintuitive, but happier individuals tended to show higher trust in government, often regardless of their own specific evaluation of government performance on certain issues.
Yeah.
It points towards something political scientists sometimes call diffuse support. It's this underlying baseline level of faith or goodwill towards the system, towards the government. It's more stable, less easily swayed by every single policy or service interaction. High individual happiness seems to foster this kind of durable, long-term trust.
That's kind of profound, actually.
Yeah.
It brings subjective well-being right into the heart of political science and public administration.
It really does.
So what are the policy implications then? If citizen happiness affects trust, should governments be, I don't know, actively trying to make people happier, not just delivering services efficiently?
That's the huge question it raises, isn't it? And the study argues, yes, this provides an empirical basis to consider happiness not just as a nice outcome, but as a potential policy goal itself. It suggests maybe governments need more nuanced policies, maybe customized approaches that consider individual happiness levels, not just uniform efforts to boost objective performance metrics.
That's a massive shift in thinking, moving beyond just inputs and outputs to actual human feeling and well-being as a measure of success and a driver of trust.
It implies that, yes, how does this new park make people feel? Does this policy contribute to overall well-being? It integrates subjective experience right into the policy calculus.
Fascinating. Did the study find any other specific correlations with government trust in the Korean context? Maybe things that were expected or unexpected?
It did. The correlation analysis showed some interesting patterns. Trust was positively correlated with, as expected, public service satisfaction. Also with political disposition, stronger support for the ruling party meant higher trust. No surprise there.
Right.
And confirming the main finding, trust was positively correlated with happiness. Also with general trust in other people. People who trust others tend to trust the government more. And interestingly, being female and older age were also associated with higher trust in this Korean sample.
Okay, women and older people showing more trust. What about things like education and income? Those often play a big role.
This is where it got really specific to the Korean context. Trust showed a negative correlation with education level. Higher education was linked to lower trust.
Any theories why?
The paper doesn't definitively say, but you could speculate maybe more critical thinking, more access to information, higher expectations among the more educated in that specific context. But the really surprising finding was about income. Initially, in the simple correlation, there was no significant link between income and trust.
No link at all. That seems odd.
It does, but then when they did a more sophisticated analysis, a hierarchical regression, they found that increased income actually predicted lower government trust.
Lower trust with higher income. That completely goes against what you often hear, right? Where higher socioeconomic status sometimes correlates with more institutional trust.
Exactly. It contradicted their initial hypothesis and common trends seen elsewhere. It really highlights something unique about the dynamics of trust, income, and perhaps perceptions of equity or government priorities within that specific Korean societal context at that time.
That's genuinely surprising. It underscores how context matters so much in public administration. How reliable was this research? Was the methodology sound?
They were very thorough on the methodology.
Yeah.
They used data from the 2020 Social Integration Survey by the Korea Institute of Public Administration, a big nationwide survey of adults, so a good representative sample.
Okay.
They used standard statistical techniques like correlation and, importantly, hierarchical multiple regression to isolate the effects of different variables. They also checked the reliability of their measurement scales using Cronbach's alpha, and the scores were good.
Did they check for common statistical traps, like variables being too similar or the survey method itself skewing results?
Yes, they did. They specifically tested for multicollinearity using VIF scores, and all were well below the threshold, so the variables weren't problematically overlapping. They also tested for common method bias using Harmon's single-factor test, and the results indicated it wasn't a significant issue. They were quite meticulous about the statistical rigor.
Okay, so robust findings. What does all this deep contextualized research into trust and happiness? What does it mean for the students actually in SNU's MPA program? How does it shape their experience?
It means the program isn't just teaching out of a standard textbook. It's actively engaged in research on critical, contemporary, and highly relevant issues within its specific context. It's exploring the nuanced interplay of policy, society, culture, even psychology.
Right.
For students, this translates into exposure to cutting-edge, empirically grounded insights. It offers a unique academic perspective that goes beyond generic models. It fosters a deeper, more sophisticated understanding of public administration, preparing them to think critically and innovatively about challenges wherever they end up working.
So it gives them a different lens, a more nuanced one, especially for understanding Korea,
Yeah.
but maybe applicable elsewhere too.
Exactly.
Okay, let's connect this back to careers then. How does this unique SNU MPA translate differently for Korean students versus international graduates? What are the typical paths for Koreans graduating from this program?
For Korean students, an MPA from SNU is, frankly, a very prestigious credential. It really positions them well for key roles within the Korean public sector, central government ministries, local government agencies. It's highly regarded.
And that research focus must give them an edge.
Absolutely. Given SNU's focus on issues like trust and happiness within the Korean context, graduates are uniquely equipped to contribute to evidence-based policymaking aimed specifically at improving those things within their own governmental system. Many pursue the degree explicitly to advance careers in the civil service, public enterprises, or policy think tanks, often aiming for senior management roles where they can really shape things.
And you mentioned earlier there might be specific benefits for government employees studying there.
That's right. In Korea, government employees can sometimes get benefits like free or subsidized tuition at state universities like SNU, which makes advanced degrees much more feasible. Plus, there are often paid internship opportunities within government, helping bridge that gap between academic learning and practical application.
That's a strong incentive structure.
Yeah.
Now, what about foreigners? Getting an SNU MPA gives them this incredible inside view of Korea. How does that translate into careers potentially outside Korea, too?
For international students, the value is immense. It provides this invaluable, deep understanding of the Korean administrative system, policy landscape, and societal dynamics. This specific regional expertise is highly sought after in several areas.
Like what?
Think international organizations, the UN, World Bank, NGOs that work extensively with or in Korea. Understanding the system from the inside is crucial. Also, multinational corporations with operations in Korea, especially in roles dealing with government relations, regulatory affairs, market strategy. Knowing how things work is key.
Right, navigating the local context.
Exactly. And foreign government agencies, embassies, foreign ministries focusing on East Asian relations. The degree provides that cultural and administrative fluency needed for diplomacy or policy work related to Korea.
And does that specific SNU research on trust and happiness add value for international grads, too?
I think it adds significant value. That nuanced insight into Korean public sentiment, the subtle factors influencing trust that's gold for anyone working in international policy analysis or cross-cultural management involving Korea. It offers a strategic understanding that goes beyond surface-level observations.
That makes sense.
So while the core MPA skills, leadership, analysis, management are transferable globally, the SNU MPA layers on this distinctive regional expertise. You get the generalist skills plus the specialist knowledge, which can be a real differentiator.
It sounds like a really strategic degree for both groups, just leveraging it in slightly different ways. Okay, so for anyone listening now, maybe thinking, is an MPA right for me? What are the key practical things they should consider?
Definitely a few key practical points. First off, cost. It's a real factor. MTA tuition varies wildly. In the U.S., we saw figures anywhere from like $8,000 a year up to $42,000 or more. So you really need to research specific programs and factor in the financial commitment. It's significant.
Yeah, that's a huge range. Diligence required there. What about the time it takes?
Program length. Typically, a full-time MPA takes 1 to 2 years. Most programs are around 35 to 45 credits, but many offer part-time options, so the pace can definitely vary depending on your own situation, if you're working, etc.
And are there flexible options for people who are working or can't relocate, like online programs?
Yes, absolutely. The landscape has changed a lot. There are many fully online and hybrid MPA programs available now. That offers huge flexibility for people who need to balance studies with work or family life. Makes it much more accessible.
That's good to know. What about prior experience? Do you need work experience to get in or to succeed afterwards?
It's often beneficial, though not always a strict requirement for admission everywhere. Having some relevant background, maybe in public service or nonprofits, can definitely strengthen your application, and it certainly helps you leverage the degree faster once you graduate. Some higher-level government roles, especially executive ones, absolutely require years of prior experience, so the MPA becomes more of an advancement tool in those cases.
Okay, so helpful but not always mandatory, depending on the program and your goals. And lastly, maybe the most important thing.
I think ultimately it comes down to passion for public service, is that your driving force. An MPA is really for people who are genuinely motivated to make a difference in communities, to tackle societal problems, to contribute to the common good. It's less about personal profit and more about public purpose. If that resonates with you, if you find yourself thinking about how to improve systems or create a more equitable society, then yeah, an MPA is definitely a path worth seriously considering. It can be incredibly rewarding on both a personal and professional level.
Okay, so we've really covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at the MPA degree itself, the curriculum, the skills, the wide range of careers it opens up.
Right, from government to nonprofits, healthcare, even the private sector in some roles.
And we took that fascinating deep dive into Seoul National University's program, highlighting not just its structure and admissions, but its unique research focus on that link between public service, citizen happiness, and government trust.
Yeah, that research really offers it a different way to think about effective public administration, moving beyond just performance metrics.
We also touched on how the degree translates into careers differently, perhaps, for Korean nationals versus international graduates, leveraging that specific SNU context.
And the key takeaway seems clear. An MPA isn't just a degree, it's really a commitment. A commitment to trying to impact lives, improve communities, contribute to something larger than yourself.
Whether that's managing a city, analyzing policy, running a nonprofit, the MPA provides the tools.
Exactly. And considering that SNU research really leaves us with a provocative thought to chew on, doesn't it?
Which is,
What if the most effective path to building lasting trust in government isn't just about perfecting policies or delivering flawless services? What if it's also, maybe even more fundamentally, about actively understanding and cultivating societal well-being and happiness?
how might focusing on happiness as an actual policy goal truly reshape public administration? Could it lead to a more trusting, maybe more collaborative, and ultimately a more flourishing society?
It's a big question, something for you, our listeners, to mull over as you think about your own path and how you might want to contribute.
Definitely food for thought. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope this exploration gave you some valuable insights and maybe sparked some curiosity.